The courtroom was suffocatingly silent. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted uncomfortably, eyes glued to the defendant, a worn-out man in his 50s with deep lines carved into his face. He looked like someone who had lived too many lifetimes in just one. Accused of a crime he insisted he didn't commit, he sat alone, without a lawyer, waiting for a verdict that could destroy his life. The judge's gavel rested on the bench, untouched. The air was thick with tension. Reporters sat at the back, pens poised, ready to record scandal. Spectators whispered. The prosecution smirked in confidence. Then, the heavy oak doors creaked open. Everyone turned, and in walked Donald Trump, wearing a navy suit, a crimson tie, and an unreadable expression. He stepped into the courtroom as if he belonged there. No guards. No entouraje. Just him. The whispers turned into gasps. Cameras clicked. The judge raised an eyebrow. Even the defendant looked confused. Trump walked slowly past the benches, his shoes echoing with each step, until he stood right before the judge's bench. "I need 5 minutes," he said calmly. "That man's life depends on it." For a moment, the entire courtroom froze. The judge blinked, as if unsure whether what he saw was real. The prosecution exchanged looks. The defendant sat upright, still stunned. The tension thickened like a storm cloud rolling in. "Mr. Trump," the judge said, his voice carefully measured, "you have no legal standing in this case. You are not a witness, nor counsel. I ask you to leave." Trump didn't flinch. He looked directly at the judge, his tone firm but respectful. "I understand, Your Honor. But if you'll allow me just 5 minutes, I believe I can reveal something critical, something that will prove this man's innocence." The murmurs became louder. People leaned in. Phones are discreetly raised to record. The prosecutor stood abruptly. "This is highly irregular, Your Honor. We cannot allow this circus." But before the judge could respond, the defendant, eyes wide, finally found his voice. "I don't know him," he said. "I swear I've never met Mr. Trump before. I don't understand why he's here." Trump turned to him, nodded once. "You don't have to know me," he said. "I'm here because I couldn't sit back and let this happen." The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "And if this is a stunt, Mr. Trump, I'll hold you in contempt." Trump nodded. He opened a small folder he had brought with him and held up a single photograph. "This," he said, "is a security cam photo taken from a store across the street. Time-stamped the exact moment the crime supposedly took place. And this man," he pointed to the defendant, "wasn't anywhere near the scene." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. He laid out more documents, receipts, a time-stamped phone call log, even a voice message. Each piece fitting together like a puzzle no one had known existed. The room transformed from disbelief to stunned silence. And all of it had only taken 3 minutes. The courtroom held its breath. Donald Trump didn't rush. He opened his leather folder with practiced calm and began pulling out documents with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times in his mind. Every eye followed his hands. Every whisper died down. "First," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber, "this is a surveillance photo, taken from a convenience store 3 blocks away from the alleged crime scene. Time-stamped to the exact minute the prosecution claims the incident occurred." He held the photo up. A projector screen blinked to life. There it was, the defendant, clearly visible, standing in line at the counter, holding a bottle of water and a loaf of bread. Gasps rippled through the room. A few jurors leaned forward. Reporters furiously scribbled notes. The prosecutor's lips tightened. Trump continued. "Next, a printed receipt from that very store. Credit card ending in 7132. Timestamp matches the footage exactly." He laid the receipt down on the judge's bench. The air in the room felt heavier. No one interrupted him, not even the judge. "And here," Trump said, pulling out a phone log, "is a record of a 12-minute phone call between the defendant and his daughter at the exact time the crime supposedly occurred. Voice data is available. I can play it now, if you wish." The judge furrowed his brow. The prosecutor began rifling through his papers, suddenly less sure. Something was unraveling, and fast. Trump didn't pause. "There's more," he said. A voice message from a friend of the defendant. He confirms that the two were meeting at a coffee shop over a mile away at the time of the incident. He played the recording aloud. Yeah, we were having coffee. He was telling me about getting laid off. No way he was anywhere else. The voice was calm, unscripted, unmistakably real. Silence followed. Not the forced silence of formality, but the stunned silence of a room realizing they may have condemned the wrong man. Trump raised his head and looked directly at the judge. I don't need anyone here to know who I am, he said steadily. But everyone here deserves to know the truth. And the truth is, this man didn't do what they said he did. The room remained frozen. No one moved. No one dared speak. And in that moment, the man on trial didn't look like a criminal anymore. He looked like someone who'd just been handed back his future by a stranger who chose justice over silence. Something had shifted in the room. Moments ago, the defendant had looked like a broken man, shoulders hunched, eyes empty, waiting for the weight of the world to crush him once more. But now his posture had changed. He sat straighter. His hands no longer trembled. His eyes, though still red, held a flicker of something new. Hope. It moved through the courtroom like a silent wave. One by one, people began to look at the man differently, not as a suspect, but as a human being, as someone who may have been wronged. The jurors whispered among themselves. The court stenographer, who hadn't flinched all day, glanced up, unsure of what she was witnessing. Even the bailiff shifted his stance, suddenly alert. A reporter at the back leaned toward her colleague and whispered, "This isn't just a trial anymore. This is a reckoning." The prosecutor, once so confident, now looked visibly rattled. He cleared his throat, tried to maintain composure, but the rhythm of the trial was no longer his to control. Trump stood still, eyes fixed on the bench, the folder now closed. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He had said what he came to say, and that was enough. The judge leaned forward slowly, fingers laced together. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Trump?" Trump nodded once. His tone was even, measured. "Yes, Your Honor. I want to make one thing clear." He paused. "I didn't come here today to defend a friend. I've never met this man before in my life. I came because injustice left unchecked is a threat to every one of us. When the system fails the innocent, it's not just one life at stake. It's the soul of the society we claim to stand for." Silence. No one moved. Even the prosecutor stopped fidgeting. The defendant turned toward Trump, lips parted in disbelief. It wasn't just the words that struck the courtroom. It was the weight behind them. Trump's presence wasn't about politics, fame, or headlines. It was about something far simpler, something rarer, a choice to do the right thing. The judge sat back, looking not at Trump, but the man on trial. His gaze lingered there. In that moment, it no longer mattered who you were, how much power you had, or whether you believed in Trump or not. What mattered was this. A man was nearly condemned by silence, and another man refused to stay silent. From the back of the courtroom, someone began to clap. Just once, hesitant, then another, and another, until the room was filled, not with cheers, not with noise, but with the quiet applause of people witnessing something they didn't see often enough. Justice, or at least the hope of it. The applause faded as quickly as it had begun, replaced once again by a tense, humming silence. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, once, twice. His face was unreadable, but the weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the room. He glanced down at the documents Donald Trump had presented, then at the court clerk, then finally back at the defendant. "We will take a brief recess," he announced, standing. "This court needs to verify the authenticity of the evidence just presented." The tension broke like a snapped wire. Clerks scrambled. Phone calls were made. A court tech double-checked timestamps. The prosecution made a last-ditch effort to discredit the new material, but it was already too late. The truth had slipped through the cracks, and now it was running like wildfire. Donald Trump remained still. Not triumphant, not smug, just present, focused. 15 minutes later, the judge returned to the bench. Everyone stood. Then, silence again. He cleared his throat and looked over the rim of his glasses. "This court has verified the surveillance footage, the transaction receipt, the phone logs, and the voice message submitted by Mr. Trump. He said, voice firm but calm. All are authentic and admissible. He turned to the prosecution. Do you have anything further to add before I proceed? The lead prosecutor stood. He looked defeated. His voice barely rose above a whisper. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded once. He took a deep breath, then turned to the defendant. In light of the new evidence, this court finds the defendant not guilty. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in a collective exhale. The defendant slumped forward in his seat, tears running silently down his cheeks. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. A life, nearly ruined, had just been returned. He rose slowly, walked toward Trump, then stopped. His lips trembled. His eyes searched for words that didn't exist. Trump offered a simple nod. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. But someday, someone else will need help. And you'll remember how this felt. The man nodded, wiping his face with trembling hands. Then he hugged Trump. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't political. It was two human beings standing on the ruins of a system that had almost failed them both, and finding dignity in the aftermath. The judge stood and exited. The press rushed toward the door. Cameras flashed, but the center of the storm had passed. Trump turned to leave. Someone asked, "Why did you even come?" He paused, just for a moment, then answered without turning around. Because no one else did. And then he walked out. No podium, no cameras, no speech. Just a quiet man who made a loud difference, because 5 minutes in the right hands can change a lifetime. The sun was setting by the time Donald Trump stepped outside the courthouse. The crowd was larger now. Reporters, bystanders, curious strangers. They'd heard the story secondhand. Fragments passed from one person to another. Trump just saved a man in court. He showed up out of nowhere. The guy was innocent the whole time. No one had planned this moment. There was no stage, no campaign banner, no press secretary arranging microphones. Just Trump, walking down the steps with the same calm he carried inside. A woman in her 20s stepped forward and asked, "Is it true? You didn't even know him?" Trump paused. "That's true." "Then why?" she pressed, genuinely confused. He looked at her, not with the glare of a public figure, but with the focus of a man who had just seen a broken system blink. "Because the truth doesn't care whether we're strangers or friends," he said. "It just needs someone to stand up for it." The reporters began to shout questions, the cameras rolled, but Trump didn't stay. He got into a black car and left. No interview, no headline-grabbing statement. But the silence he left behind was louder than any soundbite. The story exploded online within hours. Clips from the courtroom leaked, Trump calmly presenting the evidence, the judge's announcement of not guilty, the hug between two men who had never met before that moment. Social media didn't know what to do with it. Some praised him. He didn't have to do it, but he did. Others questioned his motives. Is this a setup for something bigger? But amid all the noise, one truth stood above the rest. An innocent man was almost lost, and a stranger saved him. In a cafe across the city, an older man watched the replay on his phone. He put his coffee down and whispered, "Maybe the world isn't as far gone as I thought." A teenage girl shared the clip to her followers with a caption, "What if one day I'm the one who needs help and no one stands up?" A schoolteacher showed the story to her class the next morning. "What does this teach us?" she asked. A boy raised his hand. That power isn't always about control. Sometimes it's about courage. As for the man Trump saved, he tried to return to a normal life, but something had shifted inside him. He couldn't walk past someone crying on the subway without stopping. He couldn't ignore a stranger struggling with their groceries. He found himself doing small things, quiet, invisible acts of kindness, because he remembered what it felt like when someone saw him at his lowest and didn't walk away. In his small apartment, late one night, he wrote a note. "I owe my life to a man who owed me nothing. So now, I owe everything to those who have nothing." He folded the paper, placed it in his wallet, and carried it with him every day after that. The courtroom, the gavel, the verdict, it all became part of a bigger story. Not about Donald Trump as a politician, but Donald Trump as a citizen. A man with influence who could have ignored the world's quiet injustices, but chose not to. He didn't save a nation that day. He didn't fix the system. But he saved one man. And sometimes, one is enough to remind everyone else what we're capable of when we stop looking away. It had been 7 years. The world had changed, as it always does. New leaders, new controversies, new headlines. But some stories don't fade with time. They deepen. In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, a man now in his 60s stood in front of a group of high school students. His voice was steady, his suit modest, his eyes filled with lived experience. "Most of you don't know me," he began, "but I used to be a man with no future." The students leaned forward. The room was quiet. I was wrongly accused. I was alone, and I was ready to give up. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. Then someone walked in, someone I never met, someone who owed me nothing and gave me back my life. Some students recognized the story from long ago. Others only now realized he was that man. I never became rich, never famous. But since that day, I've made one promise: to never look away when I see someone in pain. He held up an old, worn-out note, the same one he had written years ago. "I owe my life to a man who owed me nothing. So now, I owe everything to those who have nothing." The class fell silent. Later that evening, as he walked home through a light drizzle, he passed a homeless man shivering beneath a broken bus stop. Without hesitation, he took off his jacket and wrapped it around the man's shoulders. It wasn't dramatic. No one filmed it. But it was enough. Far away, in a sunlit room lined with books and quiet, Donald Trump, older now, removed from politics, watched the same man on the news. Not for his past, but for the work he now did with the poor, the forgotten, the overlooked. Trump smiled faintly and turned off the screen. He didn't say a word, because he didn't need to. Some stories don't need sequels. They just need to be remembered.